Okay, so basically we're all done now. That's the basics of doing like a panel line wash and a rivet wash and giving it some grime. So depending on your surface going on and how moist it is, that's how you get. And as you can probably see on the close-up on the other one, you can see there we've got some nice grime going on, especially underneath various areas of it. But obviously what we want to do with this particular one is take it to the extreme and really weather this one down. Now for doing that, as I said before, if you're going to go along and put it on with just literally with a brush, you can tell where you're going, you're all pretty safe. Now if you want to go a little bit sort of further with that, what you can do, you can take the wash, pop it in your airbrush. Okay, this has got the 0.2 needle in this. 0.2 needle, and we're squirting this around about sort of 22 to 25 psi. What we're going to do is gently build up some weathering. So obviously we're going to be more concentrating sort of down the back end of this one. So what we're going to do is literally come along. Okay, it's quite an awkward shape for showing to the camera, but what we're going to do is spraying it in the direction of the airflow. Okay, we are just going to put down a light coat, couple of passes, cut to air and dry it off. As I said before, the more this has got on, the better it is, because it dries to itself, okay, and it sticks, and once it sticks on very, very well. But it does need a little bit to get going. If it's looking a little bit wet, okay, then you can just move it off. And we're going to put a bit on the tail as well, because we want this one to sort of grime up and look quite dirty, especially down the back end. So we're just doing very light passes over it, and we're trying not to flood it. So imagine if you were going to be doing airbrushing generally, you just literally a couple of passes, squirting over it, okay, and then you can cut to air and dry it back perhaps. But what we've done now, because we've got the wash on there first, that's going in all the panel lines and all the stuff like that. So this will literally help us out, okay, and just give us a dirtier type of grimy look to it. So you can see going down here. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll just move this camera close up one out a little bit so you can see what's going on a little bit better. Okay, so we've done that. So what we're going to do, we're going to put a little bit around underneath the bottom. Okay, and being the wash, it's very handleable. You don't have to worry about this stuff too much. Okay, we're going to put a little bit down on the wings because we want to grime them up as well. Certainly around the undercarriage area, but what we're trying to do is just dirty this aircraft up a little bit. Okay, let's say we're just working it, and if you notice, we're still blowing it all in the direction of the airflow would be in real life. Okay, and just keep it light and don't flood it. Okay, then we're just cutting to air. We're going to dry this back. But what you'll notice is when this dries off, it dries quite light. But when we come back with our flat coat, as we'll do afterwards, it will then darken it up again. So it will go a little bit darker. Okay, and we've used one colour cut there, so we're just going to dry this off now. And what I'm going to do, if you want to watch me for a minute, I'm going to carry on round everywhere and just really weather this up, and you can watch how I do it and how it comes along. Okay, so as you can probably see, obviously handleable, it's not massively handleable, so you have to be a little bit careful and obviously watch out for wet spots. But as you can probably see, a bit better around this side, as you can see here, here's the front, totally done. No problem at all, quite grimy and everything, but then here's the back, so you can see it's a lot more dirty, and that's the type of effect we want. So what we're going to do, put a little bit up here, but as you can probably see this grime and everything, we're going to keep that as is to give it that real heavy duty weathered look to it. So when you go along and you compare it to something that hasn't been weathered so heavily, it certainly makes a real big difference. You know, something like these areas here, certainly on the back, you can see there's quite a lot of difference between the two, so they'll need to be weathered as well. So we're going to put a small little amount around the front end just to keep that all in proportion with it, but we're not going to wipe any of that away. We're going to leave that on because that's part of the weathering effect. Now obviously we could come along now and say with some rusty, give it some rusty type marks, some black for more hydraulic things and bits and pieces like that. But what I like to do is really bring it all together, get it together on its gear, flaps and things installed, and then put those final little touches on afterwards, because that way they all line up and everything else like that. But that's it. That's the basics of using the wash to give you that nice, real grimy, dirty look to your model. So okay, if you're wondering how grimy that is a good example just down in here. If we wet a cotton bud and go along, you can see the difference we've made, and that's how grimy that has made that look. Very simple, because if you don't like it, and that's the great thing about the wash, you just wet a cotton bud or a towel and you can just wipe it all off and start again, and that's the beauty with the wash. So if it does go wrong, just wipe it off, start again. The other thing as well, say you've made a little accident like there, just come along with your wash, pop it back in your airbrush for this particular part as we're doing it. Okay, all we're going to do is just lightly blow that in and we'll make that disappear. Okay, another little technique you can do is quite an interesting one, which isn't going to cause too much problems if it goes wrong and all the rest of it. If you just take a thin brush, so we've got something like here, okay, we're just going to take some of the black wash, and all we're going to do is just put a very, very small amount in a couple of little cracks in panel lines and things like that. So we're just going to run a little bit down in here, and a little bit in there. Okay, what it will do is you can see it expands and gives a slight sort of water mark to these things, which is one little technique you can do. So certainly for round, you know, things that have hatches and things like that, you can literally just go along and it just gives a slight staining effect, which is, it can work really, really well with various different types of things. It works better on armour, if I'm honest, than aircraft, but also you can do this type of effect with it. And what happens is a capillary reaction will go off and take the wash around quite nicely, but it also gives that sort of soft edge, blurred effect to it, and you can do things like that, obviously, to do it. Now, another great little trick you can do, okay, if you put a little bit more, as we say, just a bit of a puddle, okay, come along with your airbrush and blow it. And we can do this type of effect. So what we're going to do, we're going to turn the airbrush up a little bit more, and we can blow it and make those squiggly little lines and swirls and things you get. So we take a little bit more and we just put it around this one here, in that one, okay, and then as you can see, we can go along and we can give little track marks, and it looks like hydraulics have given off a little bit, so we're a bit more in this area, okay, and then it dries them back, and obviously you get that type of effect. So you can give, if you wanted to, as I say, it's more of an armour gig this one than this, but you can get some very nice weathering effects just by doing it. Unusual thing, if it doesn't work or you don't like it, just wipe it off, start again. But you can do this type of effect underneath. So if we just come in here, so it looks like it's come out the doors and everything, and you can do runoff. So obviously on vehicles and armour and bits and pieces like that, you can do quite a bit. Quite a large one on the go here. So we're going to blow that right to the rear. We don't want it to go over there. So we're going to blow it right off the back. But we can blow it in all directions to get a sort of squirrely effect to it all. So if this makes sense, you can hopefully see what I'm trying to do here and recreate. But you get that nice now, as you can see under here, we've got that sort of real grimy hydraulic effect. So we put some around, blow it all around and just build up your areas of it quite nicely. So this one. Let's just do a few in this area up here. Okay, and as I said, if you don't like that effect, take it away and forget about it, wipe it away, and away you go. There we go. It's just a nice effect you can do, and it works really, really well, as I say, on armour and specifically sort of heavy duty things like that, rather than the lighter things. But certainly if you wanted to do aircraft run-offs, perhaps where they've been stood around a little bit of the time, hydraulic leaking, things like that as it's blowing back. So what we do, we're just going to pop a few little bits of darker wash, the black, into various things. This could be a good one to do, and then all we're going to do is going to run that off. We'll just atomise it all around and blow it all around, just like that. Just puts it everywhere. And we'll say that all running down the back. A couple of these. You might be able to see there, we get that type of run-off effect then, which dries in. But as I say, if you don't like it, don't worry, take it off. What we're going to do is just fill these little gaps up here. So we're just going to pop some in the black wash in that one, and we'll have a little bit of the black wash in that one. Okay, and then we're going to do is just going to run some more down the back. Squeeze them all around, and there we go. That gives us that type of effect. So what we do, we're just going to put one more little one just running around here, so it makes it look like runoff out of hydraulics, just like that. And that gives, as I say, other little weathering things you can work with. But as I say, the great thing with the wash, because it's very forgivable, you know, and obviously you don't like it, just wipe it off, start again. But you can sort of build up layers and layers and layers with it. And as I say, it does go wrong, don't worry, wipe off, start again, come back. You can add to it, you can take away, whichever you want to do. And obviously by using the different colours, you can come up with a variety of techniques to give you some great weathering. Okay, so we're getting on quite a nice pace now. Obviously this has been totally dry. So what we've actually done, we've fitted the undercarriage on. Pretty straightforward as we did before. It is unweathered yet. We're going to weather it once it's on there. Drop a super glue, and then all we've done is push it all into place. Quite happy with that. The great thing about using super glue is if you do knock it, it happens to shear off normally where it is. So I do like putting undercarriage on with super glue, just in case it takes a whack, because then it usually comes off where the joint is and is easily repairable. Whereas if you've glued it in place, okay, it'll be tougher, but if it breaks, it's a nightmare. So that's that done. Now, as I said, we've got the wheels on the go here, so we just have a quick run through of what we've done. I'm going to put a bit of tissue down, purely because I don't want to scrape the paint off of the actual hubs themselves, because they're green. So we put one hub down, the tyre goes on top, just like so. Okay, then we just sort of roughly poke all that in, get it in, and then the back one can come on as well. And then a bit of a squish down, hopefully brings it through. Now we've taken the paint off just the end there, just the tip. But that's not really a problem, because what we'll do is we'll touch them in with a little bit of colour anyway. So that's that done, and then all I did, grab some of the black wash, okay, on a thin type of brush, something like this, and all we did, we just come along and then just give it a bit of a touch round with the wash and let it flood the areas, make sure it goes everywhere. Okay, just like that, very simple. Once it's done, it should end up looking rather like that one. And then, as I say, on the larger scale, on these bigger hubs, all nicely weathered up and done, so not a problem with those. Now, the radar itself on the front end is something else which we're going to have to install. We weathered that as well. That's got some weathering done onto that. Now, you could add a little bit of wiring on there, which would certainly liven it all up, in something I'll be looking about doing, perhaps once we've got it on there for finishing touches. But there we go, that's that one done as well, weathered up. But so I'm not going to put it on, because otherwise I know what happened, I'll knock it off. So just thinking ahead there. So we just move these wheels and everything out of the way. Now we've got the actual aircraft onto its somewhat onto its gear, we can add the rest of the struts and things on there. Very straightforward, just follow your instructions and those can go on. So we'll get those on in a minute. Now the other thing is obviously the flaps and the slats that are going to go on here. They obviously had a wash and were weathered exactly the same way as the others. So all we're going to do, roughly the same job as we did before. Your slats are going to come on quite nicely and should just fit in to where the others are. So it will go in something like this. Okay, and then you can just glue them into place. Now, as I said, we've got the grey showing through. If that's realistic or not, I'm not sure. But what we can do is pop along with some post shading afterwards and take care of that. But a drop of glue in each one of those will just lock that in position. Same goes for the flaps at the back, the trailing edge flaps. They're going to click on and just be glued into place as well, and then really it's going to give it its sense of shape and bite. Same thing will go with the stabilizers. We'll glue them on in place as well in a moment. Now that's the other thing, check your references to see how they are, how you actually want them. Do you want them to be sat in the sort of horizontal position? When you look at some of the references, they're showing up a little bit, some of the references are showing them down. So what you want to do is have a look at a photo, see an aircraft at rest, and then you can actually have a look at it. One thing you can notice there is the difference in the weathering. As I said, we did before, we did this heavy duty weathering down here, and obviously it hasn't had it on the tail. So what we do a little bit of post weathering on that, and we'll weather that in as well. So that's quite a nice touch. So we just pull this out because it's quite a tight fit and we don't want to knock it off at this moment until it's glued on. So once we've got those bits on, we can come along, we'll put the gear on, the tyres on as well. That'll just be a drop of super glue and that'll just be fitted on just like that, job done. Quite straightforward, and when it'll really bring this start together, because it's had a flat coat, I can actually unmask it now, so we can have a look at this cockpit area and we can start to get that installed. I'll say this is going to be one of those, being very, very careful of how this all comes out. There we go, and then obviously, you said before, if you use the blue tack to get the bits off. There we go, that's our cockpit open, but as you can see we've got some bits there, but that's not a problem there again. We're going to weather that out with a little bit of silver chipping and all the rest of it to act like it's got a little bit of wear around the cockpit where the crew have been getting in and out. So they're all little touches where you think at the time, you know, oh, is it going to work? You know, it's going to look horrible, this is going to go wrong. But when you think about it, you know, we can repair anything that's on these things, and most of them, when you're doing a heavy weathered aircraft like this, we can make it into weathering as well. So I'll get all these bits together. I'll get the flaps on, the slats on, everything else like that. We'll get the tail planes on and the gear, and then we'll come together for doing a little bit more weathering. Okay, so we've moved on quite a bit here. You can probably see we've got the undercarriage all on now, everything else done like that. We've got lots of weathering gone underneath here, so we've done a little bit more of that. The undercarriage itself is all very nicely strong, very fitted sturdily. Same with the air brakes. Now all we had to do was go around and re-weather all of this lot on again. So what we did, we went around and did the underside just to weather that up. So we've got the gear doors on, everything else like that, so the underside is basically fitted. Also what we've done, we've picked out some of the little silver areas. You probably see one under here on the close-up. These are for the lights, so we've done those, and we've done these ones, you probably see up here these round ones which we were talking about doing by hand, so we've done those. Moving further forward, you can probably see we've got the aerials going on the top, and we've got the actual the PTO tubes on, angle of attack sensors, and we've now glued in the radome just like that. Haven't put the actual main canopy on yet because it's such a delicate fit that I think it's going to break off very, very easily. We've also painted the refueling probe, which is quite a loose fit at the moment. And things like that. At the same time, obviously we weathered up the nose cone, just a little bit of dirt sprayed on, so it gives us a nice dirty, grimy effect on there. So really the aircraft's coming together. A few bits still to do on that, but what I wanted to move on to was doing some of the fuel tanks. Now these massive great fuel tanks on these are going to fit just down underneath here. They're very large, and it's very rare that you'll see the Penta flying without them, so it's quite important to have them on. So what I've actually done, I've also built the multiple ejector racks, and I'm doing quite a basic loadout for this, as if it's sort of the export version of it, and obviously it wouldn't have the more technical weapons and things like that. So I'm just going to go along with a MIA, or a multiple ejector rack, with some of the 3-4 bombs. which are going to go on. So it's quite complex putting this together. It's not like some of the more Western companies who tend to mould this in one. They've done it separately, and we haven't put the spray braces on yet because they're going to be silver. But we've built them up as part of the instructions. We've done the freefall bombs, and as a case with these fuel tanks. Now, one thing to remember with the fuel tanks is the little leading canards, if you like, on the front of these are actually angled slightly downwards. They actually slope downwards. So I don't know how well you can see that there on the camera, on the close-up. You probably see it. And on that one it'll be facing up. But what you want them to do is to be pushing down, so it looks like from the top both of them would dig down like a submarine would. The reason for that is when they're fitted to this pylon, it helps the aircraft separate the fuel tanks from the aircraft, so it's pushed down and away, because apparently they have a habit of flying upwards. So by having them facing down, when they're ejected from the actual aircraft, they're going to come along and they're just going to eject downwards, and the airflow will push them down. So that's the reason for doing those. So what we can now do, we can spray those bits up. So as I said, I've also sprayed up all the little pylons and everything else like that. They're done and separately over to one side, and they can have a wash just the same as everything else. So to save time, what I actually did was, these were sprayed in Tamiya XF 22, which is the RLML grey, like that, for these ejector racks, and then obviously we're going to pick a dark grey for the actual bombs as well. So what I did at the same time, I was pre-shading, had the paint left over, so I've pre-shaded these fuel tanks. Now these fuel tanks I'm going to do the same as that underside colour, so it's the colour that we made up before. So we just give that a good old shake. Now what we want this to do is be very rough and weathered, the same as the aircraft would be, if not more. These fuel tanks got a lot of abuse. They literally weren't lifted nicely on and off. They were almost dropped onto pallets underneath the aircraft when they're removed and things like that. So what we're going to do, we've still got the colour down in here. All we're going to do is add to it straight on top, and it'll be a dirty colour. This is neat unthinned. So what we're going to do, we're just going to find a way of holding these on best. So what we're going to do, grab a couple of cocktail sticks or toothpicks, depending where you are in the world, ram them in, gives us something to hold on to, and then obviously we can stick them in something to dry out. So just check our flow. Coming through this grimy colour. So it's quite a rough job on those. That's it. Basically done. By the time we weather it and get that in, it should look about right. But say it's quite rough, and because it's done neat, it'll give us a nice weathering that it will all stick to with any luck and go through. So we're just going to do the same for the other one.